Welcome to the XS Noize Podcast. I'm Mark Millar, and on this episode, I'm joined by Peter Hooton, frontman of legendary Liverpool band The Farm. If you missed our last episode, I spoke with Snow Patrol's Gary Lightbody, so be sure to check it out. The band behind indie dance anthems like Groovy Train and All Together Now are back with their first new album in over 30 years. Let the music take control. Packed with the same feel-good energy, political edge and infectious grooves that defined them in the early 90s. Peter talks about the band's creative reunion, making a new record, their live return, and why Liverpool remains central to everything The Farm do. We also dive into the legacy of All Together Now, their activism, and what's next. So let's get into it. This is Peter Hooton from The Farm on the XS Noize Podcast. So, hi Peter, welcome back to the XS Noize Podcast.
It's a pleasure. Good to be back.
It's always great to have you on. Before we dive into the music, I want to acknowledge the recent tragedy in Liverpool. As someone so rooted in the city, how have you been processing it personally?
Well, I'm everyone was just relieved that there was no fatalities, and it was a great weekend of celebration, and, it's just really depressing here in the news, I think one thing you can be assured of is that the city rallied round, and I was getting messages late into the night saying, can anyone give a lift here? Can anyone give a lift there? So I think it just proved that, the thing is that Liverpool is a community the number of people from outside the city was absolutely amazing. It was like, they reckon 1.5 million people were at the parade, So I think it's obvious that lots of people came from all around the country who've got a support of Liverpool Football Club, and obviously the transport links and everything was were really difficult, But I think genuinely people did rally around, and proved there is a such thing as community.
Yeah, Liverpool always seems to come together in the face of adversity. What is it about the city that fosters that unity and resilience?
I think we're obviously influenced by the population and where the population came from, and that was from Ireland and Wales and the surrounding Lancashire area, And I think there's a sense of community. I think it all stems from the docks. I think it all stems from the solidarity of the trade union movements and the dockers, and they fought long and hard to get conditions on the docks which were safe. And I think that attitude has come from there. There's no doubt about that in my mind, Very different to what was happening in the rest of the country in the Industrial Revolution. People were tended to be in mills, and trade unions were a lot stronger in places like Manchester. Liverpool was a difficult city to organise. That's what the trade union leaders always used to say, But I think when the dockers were united and when they saw injustice, they gathered together, and I think that solidarity and that community spirit comes from the docks. There's no doubt about it. And obviously because of migration to the Americas and to the, to Australia and places like that, there was a sense of, that people joined together and helped each other. I mean, obviously there's people, what really depresses me when I see all the stuff on social media, about Liverpool, I think it really depresses you when you see that, because a lot of them are just stereotypes from the 70s and 80s, That is really depressing when you see things like that. But I think when something happens like Hillsborough, or what happened even in the Grand National at the time, it was called off all those years ago, and people just started to help each other, I think the city has got, I think that's human nature, I think it's human nature rather than just, something that, Liverpool possesses. It's human nature. And in the face of adversity, I think Liverpool has had lots of diversity and people stick together. Hence the Sun boycott.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably one of the most successful boycotts in the history of boycotts,
And quite rightly so.
it's up there with the South African boycott, I think, in terms of mobilisation of people to not to buy the Sun in Liverpool and Merseyside. So I think there's a feeling of community and solidarity there. But I wouldn't overemphasise that, because there's obviously not everybody's like that, of course. But I think what I was at Hillsborough, and what I called the people who helped each other on that day were heroes.
Yeah.
And then they were vilified a few days later in a disgraceful newspaper, which was basically a pack of lies, and was proven at the inquest was a total pack of lies. But it was done for political reasons. And when people see that, they remember it. And that's why that boycott has been so successful and so solid.
Even Blue Noses don't buy the Sun.
Exactly. Yeah.
The Farm are back with your new album, Let the Music Take Control. It's your first album since Hullabaloo, which came out in 1994, would you believe?
All those years ago.
Yeah. Why was now the right moment for the Farm to return to the studio?
I think we've been doing concerts, and people were saying, when can we hear we've been introducing 2 or 3 new songs at our concerts. People were just saying, why can't we, when are these available? They're not. And when we got talking to fans and that, they were saying, just throw them on Spotify. So it was Keith Mullen, really. Keith Mullen got in touch with a company called Ditto in Liverpool and said, look, let's put these new songs on this platform, and we already had our back catalogue altogether, our Groovy Train, Mind, Love, See No Colour on BMG, because they control the back catalogue, they license the back catalogue. But we thought with the new songs, just let's test the water. And then all of a sudden, Fear the Love got playlisted on Radio 2, and we hadn't even really tried to get on Radio 2. We didn't have a plug at the time. I think Carl Hunter sent it in. And then there was another lad called who we employed eventually as the radio plugger, and it got playlisted. And then Modern Sky, who the Liverpool record label, they said, we really like this. Have you got any other stuff? So we played it to them. Let the Music Take Control, and Forever and Ever, and Moments in Time. And they said, we love this. It sounds great. Sounds really fresh. Have you got an album's worth of material? And we didn't. But we wrote about 3 or 4 new songs as well last year. And they wanted to release it, you see. So that's how it all came about, really. It wasn't a master plan or a blueprint. It was just, we were testing the water, really, see if anyone was interested,
So how did it feel stepping back into the creative process together after all this time?
It's a bit strange, really, because, promotion and interviews and all that. But I mean, I love doing interviews, I love talking about the legacy of the Farm. And so, I love doing interviews, and I love talking about music and the city of Liverpool and the world in general, So, yeah, I like doing promotion, just come back from Modern Sky now, where we spent 3 hours signing the pre-orders, Everyone's like, oh my God, another box. But it's great, because it takes you back to the days when Spartacus was out, the heady days of the Farm, Hullabaloo was never released in this country. It was only on Sire Records in America, So it's even longer than that, than 94, I think it was, before that was Love, See No Colour was 92, But yeah, it's great writing new stuff and hearing new stuff. And, the thing is, we've been playing the new stuff at concerts, 3 or 4 new songs out of a set list of 10. And they go down really well. So it's not as if, I just joke about it. I said, here's another new one, And I said, like your jukebox Geordie, but they always get a cheer at the end of it, Yeah, we're pretty pleased the way the album sounds,
Yeah, it blends Balearic beats, indie rock, funk-driven grooves. Was that mix part of the plan, or did it emerge naturally in the studio?
It just emerged naturally in the studio. Of course, Steve does a lot of the beats, Steve Grimes, the co-writer, is me. Steve and Keith Mullen do the music, and then they give it to me to add the lyrics, and that was all part of the plan. But we had people working on that as well, I mean, it was engineered by Chris Taylor at Kempston Street, And then Mike Cave did the mastering, and just tweak some of the drum sounds to make it sound more modern, maybe, I don't know. And it's come out and we're really pleased with it. It sounds fresh, I think, and I think it's, we're pleased with it. We're pleased with it, and we just hope that people listen to it,
Yeah, songs like Forever and Ever and Feel Love channel a euphoric, uplifting vibe.
Yeah, that's the idea. That was the idea, not to be, too melancholic, but there are certain songs on there which are, bring a bit of a, there's one called Breathe and another one called Eternity, and when I did Eternity, it was really sad singing that, because it was about, I've just been to a funeral of somebody that we knew, and also my dad was seriously ill in hospital, gladly, he's recovered, but, I sung that as if, it was the end of people's lives, and I think that comes across and it's very, we're trying to get that Eno vibe, the ending,
Well, funny you say that there, when I listened to it, and it's the track to the end of the album and it's very fitting the end of the album, but I thought, this is the Farm doing you too.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. We didn't, it was mainly, I think the idea was to, it was more atmospheric,
Yeah.
I think it sounds like you too. Yeah.
Yeah. The Eno produced you too. When that's
right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Eno was a big influence on that track, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that makes sense. Well, it sort of definitely reminded me of the stuff that he would have done with you too. Forever and Ever, it touches on obsession and infatuation. Did that emotional edge influence the rest of the record lyrically, do you think?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I mean, the Field of Love was based on an experience we had on Ibiza when we met DJ Harvey, and he convinced us to go to a mountain at like 2:00 in the morning, which our transport, the van driver, wasn't so happy about and left the tour the next day. We went to this like hippie commune where he said, we've got a generator. Yeah, that's all we need. We haven't got electricity or running water, but it's in the hills. Come with me. And at the time we were pretty cynical Liverpudlians, but Harvey, all our cynicism evaporated and we just followed Harvey. He was like the Pied Piper, And I don't even know if he's still DJing, isn't he? But I don't even know he knows that we wrote this about him. But it's about that experience where our cynicism evaporated in the face of, he was just so welcoming, so inviting, and that's what Fear the Love is about. So yeah, that's a spiritual aspect to that. Yeah, Forever and Ever it's I wrote that in terms of obsession, but also never giving up. Never giving up on an idea of something can happen. And Moments in Time is about self-healing. That was the idea behind that. So yeah, there's all sorts of different aspects to most lyrics are right. I feel as if they've got to mean something rather than throw away lyrics. Like Breathe is about the Lakota Sioux, who had the big demonstrations a while back when the proposed pipeline was going to go under the Black Hills. And I was obsessed with Native American history, So when that came about, I was, I really took an interest in it, I was even thinking of going over, but they had camps there, didn't they, to combat the oil and authorities from desecrating the sacred lands of the Black Hills, I thought it was like a really powerful thing. So Breathe is about that, you see. It's about an environmental issue, but, not a throwaway thing. It was about, about something that meant something. I think they won the case, but I think obviously with Trump being in power now, there might be an attempt to do it again, and, because he's ripping up all agreements that were made, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, listening to it, I wouldn't have known that because it's very uplifting and it's probably one of my standout tracks on the album. So it's really interesting to know that.
There's also that feeling. That feeling is about, really about, a megalomaniac, really, If you got that feeling, tomorrow belongs to me, So I had certain people in mind when I was writing that, but also can be construed as a love song as well. it's ambivalent, really. It's a bit like All Together Now in that respect, that people can listen to All Together Now and not even know it's a peace song. They listen to it, and the number of people who've been in touch with us over the years going, I was serving in Iraq, and that was our platoon, anthem. Thinking, have you listened to the lyrics? It's an anti-war song, But, people listen to lyrics on different levels, don't they,
Yeah. Well, All Together Now, it's become more than a song. As you say, it is an anthem. When did you realise its legacy had taken on a life of its own?
Probably when football teams started using it, and political organisations started using it. I think the first people to use it were the Labour Party in '92. I think that was probably Kinnock, wasn't it? And then all sorts of football teams started using it. And then it was used. Everton did use it, but they're just one of many who used it. I think Arsenal were the first team to use it. But then in 2004, England wanted to use it, and we're not like big England fans on it, and we're not nationalistic in that respect, So we went to ask the FA, and they convinced us it was an all-inclusive thing, that they were trying to get away from the image of right-wing England fans, and they were trying to be inclusive and trying to attract a multiracial aspect to the England support. And they said to us it was going to be the theme to Euro 1996 until Everton had used it in '95. So you wouldn't have had Three Lions. Three Lions wouldn't exist because they were going to use All Together Now as the main theme, So it cost us a fortune, that. But you got to laugh about it, because then in 2004 they used it, but England fans didn't adopt it because it's about being solidarity with Germans, and I think they'd rather sing about 10 German bombers, wouldn't they, the Germans loved it, and people in this country loved it in terms of what the sentiment was behind it. And then in 2014, the Premier League, 2013, the Premier League got in touch. And they said, we want to use this for the 100th anniversary of the truce. So then we recorded that again. And the Premier League was saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to get footballers involved. And nothing ever happened. In the end, we had loads of kids from the various teams from all around Europe. Barcelona, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, and they all came to Liverpool to sing on it, as a kids' chorus, and it was great. But, it was like, I don't think he can beat the original.
No,
the original,
never can.
The original was a moment in time,
Even the video, I love. It's very dated now, but it's great.
The video, it's very interesting about the video, because the video was rejected by the American record company, Sire Records. Seymour Stein, who signed the Ramones and the Talking Heads and the Bunnymen and Madonna, he signed the Farm. He had, great plans for the Farm. He said, but his record company was saying that we can't use the video. You've got to do a new video. We go, why? And he said, because it's a load of old people in a pub. And they had to do that for Groovy Train as well, because he said, who's the old guy on the... he said, oh, that's a famous Liverpool actor who's in a famous series called Brookside. And he goes, no one's heard of it in the States. Do a new one. So we had to do 2 new videos for America. One Groovy Train. You can get them on YouTube. And one was All Together Now. But then a few years later, R.E.M. did a video in black and white. I think it's because it was in black and white, the All Together Now one. They didn't want that with old people. MTV was a new big thing, and it had to have, beautiful young people in it, But then R.E.M. started doing black and white videos, and I think a lot of groups then experimented with that black and white idea. Johnny Cash did a famous one, didn't he,
Yeah.
Hurt, So, yeah, I think I think we didn't really realise at the time that it'd have a legacy, that it lasts this long,
Hard to believe. All these years, people are still playing on the radio.
Yeah. And it was also used when Liverpool won the league. I started getting texts from mates going, they're using All Together Now at the end of Sky, with that actor from The City Is Ours, And then it caused a lot of debate on who does the song belong to. And the Farm had to put a statement that the song belongs to everyone, It's an internationalist song. That was it. That's what it was written for. It was written about internationalism, the fact that the British and German troops probably had more in common than they had with the top brass, So it's it's a song about unity, really, and the human race,
Can you remember the day you sat down and actually wrote the lyric?
Yeah, sort of. Wasn't long after John Lennon was shot, so it would have been early 80s, and I'd been reading about this unofficial truce in a magazine, and I'd studied history, I was a trainee history teacher, and so basically I thought, well, I should know about this. Now, I knew a bit about it from Old Lot of Lovely War and various things, but didn't really know the enormity of it. And it's only when you start reading about the fact that it was all along 800-mile front on the Western Front, and there was, upwards to 100,000 people involved in unofficial fraternization, which is massive numbers, And I thought, I need to write something, So I wrote, and that originally was called No Man's Land. It wasn't until I went to Ibiza in 1990 that I got the idea for All Together Now, of all the different nations and all the different creeds coming together for dance music, So that's where that came from, You
spoke earlier about Liverpool's resilience. How has the city's spirit musically, politically and culturally shaped the farm over the years?
It's been a massive influence, obviously, but I'd say our main influences were like groups like The Clash and The Jam, and especially Big Audio Dynamite, who were always left out of the
great band.
Conversation, because when I saw Big Audio Dynamite in the States, in Liverpool, in the 1980s, I thought, this is the future of music, This is like mixing drum beats, hip-hop beats with samples and guitar. It was amazing, I thought, that's it, So I think that shaped us probably more than Liverpool groups as such. We were always seen as outsiders in Liverpool because nobody was in a group dressed like us, Everyone else was like, had a different image, long overcoats and, the classic indie image of the early 1980s. It wasn't really till the groups like The Farm and the Mondays came along that indie image changed slightly. And then when Oasis came along, it was like that became the indie image, not the long overcoats and spiky haircuts, It was like more like what we look like,
Yeah, it represented mod style, terrace culture and working classes, didn't it?
Yeah, that was it, yeah. I think, basically that was the way we dressed. It wasn't contrived or anything. But when we were going to record companies and publishing companies, they go, where's the image? Where's the image, And we were going, well, this is the image, This could have omni appeal. Like the Jam cut across from working class council estates to enemy readers, It could be massive, and be shaking their heads all the time, But by 1991, all those record companies would go, get me a farm, And that's what Alan McGee said. He said that, without the farm, he might never have seen, when he seen Oasis in King Tut's, he might never have took much, because without the farm doing well on our own label, and, selling lots of records,
Back in the day, you used to run the End fanzine, which was a huge part of your early journey. Could something like that exist or thrive in today's digital music world?
Yeah, I think it could, because the whole idea about the End was observational humour. There was never, in 20 editions, there wasn't one joke. There wasn't one, it was all about observational stuff, about exaggerations, of course, about bouncers, taxi drivers, coach drivers, It was but it was all observational. It wasn't like, where we thought that, we'd seen rag mags, and there was student rag mags and, and then saw an anarchist magazine in Probe Records, which was hilarious. And it was during the royal wedding, Charles and Diana. And I thought, this is vicious humour. But this is like the vicious humour John Lennon used to talk about. People like, skitting each other, Said if surely there could be a magazine that would reflect that. And that was the idea behind the End, you see. Just to make people laugh and to ridicule everything. So nothing in the End was like supposed to be fashionable. Anything that became fashionable in Liverpool was immediately in the out column. You know, the ins and outs column was a piss take on the face, or GQ, saying what the colour for next season is. It's going to be brown, it's going to be black. And it was just all tongue in cheek, and we didn't take it that seriously, but a lot of people did take it seriously. We used to get inundated with letters from all around the country, but mainly a lot of them were from places like Leeds, and the more we took the piss out of fashion crazy Yorkshiremen, the more people wanted it, and I'm still friends with a lot of Leeds people now, and it all came from the end, and I'm actually doing something in Leeds libraries in July about football fanzines and music. They've got a big exhibition on in Leeds at the moment, But the whole idea of the end was like to make people laugh, but also to have political leanings towards the left, really, It wasn't designed to, indoctrinate anyone. It was just what we felt at the time, And we're still passionate about that. Liverpool Labour Council gets a lot of bad press, but for the people who lived in Liverpool, they rehoused a lot of people, and they changed the lives of a lot of working class people from living in tenement blocks, which became now the student accommodation, some of them, but the tenement blocks, people were all offered houses, front and back gardens, and houses built to the highest standard, so it was all, we were passionate about that at the time, Obviously they made lots of mistakes, of course they did, but I think the core values of what they were trying to do was improve the lives of ordinary people in the city,
Do you see your activism and your music as separate, or are they connected?
They're connected, I think, yeah, because, we were always doing, it caused a lot of problems in the early days. We did lots of miners' benefits, we did lots of anti-apartheid benefits, we did lots of Chilean solidarity benefits, and some of the group at the time when, to go, well, we've got to earn a living and that, but we just felt as if we had to, if you're in a group and your idols are the Clash, and the Jam, you've got to live up to those standards, and that's what we did. And probably the most satisfaction we got was the Justice Tonight gigs that we did with Mick Jones in 2011, 2012, and that was really the culmination of years of campaigning for Hillsborough and raising awareness for Hillsborough. Now everyone knows what the truth is because the inquests proved what happened, But at the time, it was very hard to get people involved in that, But the groups we remember who got involved, like the Stone Roses, Mark Street Preachers, Las Vegas, Reverend the Makers, Richard Hawley, Primal Scream, it's a list of people who you think, great, fantastic, And then when we did the Justice Collective track that got to number one, He Ain't Heavy, that took on another life of its own. That was Guy Chambers. Got involved in that, And he was being inundated by, international stars, to get involved in that, And we had to knock a few people back because they were on record to say Margaret Thatcher was there, They looked up to Margaret Thatcher, so they were off. Even they might have been Liverpool fans, they were, you're not coming on it, And a guy was saying, how can I ignore these people? I'm going, well, you just have to, just don't answer the phone, or don't. But I mean, I've got some stories about that,
Do you think music still has the power to cut through disinformation and inspire real social change?
Yeah, I think it has. Yeah, I think Kneecap have proven that. Whether you agree with everything. I mean, obviously, Billy Bragg put a big statement out about Kneecap, didn't he, saying irresponsible. But they've said that off the cuff at a concert, haven't they, about MPs? They haven't really meant that, have they? But the stance on Palestine is like, it's admirable. But there's a lot of groups who won't get involved in that because, they think they're going to be cancelled, and that's, Kneecap are, they've done it because they mean it, and they've come from a situation in Belfast where, it's part of their upbringing, it's part of their life, So you can disagree with, some of the things they say, but can agree with the way they're going about it, and the fact that, I could never do that, see, because I couldn't go on stage and do that, I just couldn't do it, for whatever reason. But, that they felt as if they've got to do it because there's that thing of, from the Republican background they're from, they've all solidarity with the Palestinian movement has always been there, hasn't it? And that transpires itself to Celtic as well, doesn't it? Of course,
Yeah.
But Liverpool fans, I mean, the Spurs of Shankly, but you couldn't have that in Liverpool because, we've been criticised heavily for that, and whether I agree with it or not, no one's stopping anyone coming into Anfield with a Palestinian flag, But unfortunately, if they did put it up, the stewards would be onto them, But I think with the Green Brigade in Celtic, it's different because of that historical context. Last year, when I saw the film, and the film was fantastic, and they played at Glastonbury, didn't they? And I don't think they were announced. I think they came in at the last minute, didn't they? And it was, fantastic, and there are people who will put their heads above the parapet, I mean, Paul Weller he did stuff with Jeremy Corbyn as well, which we did in a concert in Brighton. But they did a gig for Palestine, but they never got any publicity, did it? Remember, it was before Christmas, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Never got any publicity or anything, So I think it's difficult because, obviously a lot of record companies would be telling their artists, don't get involved in that, whatever, but it's up to each person's conscience, isn't it? Whether they want to do something about it, But, I'd like to see, massive concerts with, but whether that's going to happen, it's up to promoters to do that, isn't it? But a lot of promoters will stay clear of it, won't they? Because, what's happening in Palestine is an absolute tragedy, and it's absolutely terrible. The fact that politicians are just ignoring it is the worst thing, I think, It's, it shouldn't be just about groups raising awareness, It's on the news every night, isn't it? How much awareness do you want,
But that always seems to be the way, even going back to band days, it was musicians having to get together to raise awareness for what was going on,
Yeah, I think, if you look at it, there's massive protest in Israel against what's happening in Palestine, but it doesn't tend to get much publicity anymore. It did a while back, but remember there was people on the streets, 1 million people every weekend in Tel Aviv. And it's still going on, or, it's not getting any publicity.
Well, certainly not in the mainstream media.
No.
You played everywhere from tiny clubs to massive festivals. Has your relationship with performing live evolved over the years?
Yeah, I think we enjoy it more now. I think when Spartacus was out and during that period when we were headlining, stuff ourselves, and there's so much pressure on you, I used to feel physically sick before gigs, and because there was an entourage of 20 or 30 people employed by the group, they think, what happens if my voice goes, or I get hoarse, or I lose I get laryngitis, so there was a lot of things going on in your head, Now it's a lot more relaxed. It only tends to be weekends, and it's, I enjoy it a lot more now. I think that comes across when people say it's live,
And fans are responding to the new songs live. They're embracing the new material as strong as the classics.
Yeah, we played in Venice a couple of weeks ago. Said like this jukebox joy. This is the first time some of these songs have been heard, and I want your opinion at the end of the songs, and so it's going down well, so long may it continue. Because I think they do sound like, we can tell it's the Farm because of my voice, obviously, but there's certainly a funky edge to them, and that's probably down to Keith a lot of the time because of his chance encounter with Nile Rodgers in Lipa where he worked,
Yeah, you can tell that. And, probably, I'm just thinking, it just came in my head. Word Without You, it's a belter.
Well, Without You, yeah, I love that, yeah. I love that song, yeah. And, yeah, that's about, that's about loss as well, and I just thought it was a good lyric, and someone feeling as if, we will without you, it's a really affected by that emotionally and physically, you know. But not many people have picked up on that, you know, up to now. It's mainly been, you know, Fear the Love and Moments in Time and Forever and Ever, you know. But yeah, it's good you're saying that because I particularly like that song, you know.
Yeah, I think it and Breathe are probably my two favourites. I love them.
Oh, are they? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably the least single type songs, you know.
I think Breathe could be a single.
Yeah, do you? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it popped out at me
Right.
the first time I heard the album.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, great.
Absolutely. When you're writing lyrics, you know, did it come easily to you?
When I get an idea in my head, yeah. So things like Breathe, yeah, that was quite, you know, because I just thought about me reading when I first read Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee when I was a teenager. And it really affected me. Like, yeah, I thought, this is what I've been seeing the Hollywood version, and this is the reality, you know. So when I was writing that and I was reading up about the process about the Dakota pipeline, you know, it came quite naturally to me, yeah, yeah. I mean, there are other songs which you agonise over, you know, but I tend to listen to them on my earphones, you know, and walk around and try and get inspiration from things going on around you, you know.
Is there a subject matter you've always wanted to write about, but you've never got around to?
It's hard to say, really. You know, hard to say. I mean, no, I think you know, it's one of those. I think you know, I write about anything that I think is important. You know, so I don't steer clear away from things. You know, because it might be politically, you know, dynamite at the time. You know, what's happening in the Middle East is, you know, it's so complex, and what's happening in the Ukraine, it's so complicated that you know you can't get a black and white situation. You know. It's always about, you know, the Sykes-Picot line that the British and French drew in the Middle East, wasn't it? The straight lines, you know, it all goes back to colonialism. It does, you know. And if you know, that's if you look at what's happening in the Ukraine, you know, if I ever put anything about Ukraine on Facebook, you know, I get people answer me straight away, you know, about how evil Putin is, and you know, and I'm not pro Putin at all, you know, I'm not whatsoever, but I've read up about what's happened in Ukraine, and you know, a lot of the people in eastern Ukraine want to be part of Russia, you know, and it was a civil war. Well, we never really get told the full facts. You got to look at documentaries. I mean, Oliver Stone did a brilliant documentary, Ukraine on Fire. You know, I think you still get it on YouTube, and he predicted it was done in 2016, and he predicted Western interference in Ukraine and what would happen if that went on, you know. And I will never have an opinion on whether who's in the right or who's in the wrong, because I don't know, you know, because it's so complicated that I think, you know, you've got to, you know, it won't be until a few years' time that you'll get the facts. If you say something, you know, people immediately think, you know, you're supporting these, and you know, I'm not supporting Russia, but I've been to Russia. And I went there when it was the Soviet Union, you know. I put something up about Stalingrad, I think it was. Someone come on, someone come on. And they're an educated person, but I think they've got a Ukrainian wife. And, you know, they were saying, yeah, well, what about Putin now? He's like using the May victory in Stalingrad and the May victory parade as like propaganda. And, well, of course he is. You know, that's what they do. You know, it's not. You know, but it doesn't mean I'm supporting that propaganda by saying that, you know, the Soviets were very influential in the Second World War. You know, it's just a statement of fact, isn't it?
It must be surreal seeing a new generation discovering the farm, you know, when you're playing your live shows. How does that feel?
Yeah, it feels great, yeah. I mean, you know, and we did the Jacaranda a few weeks ago, like a pop-up gig, I think they call it. We just say, oh, we're playing in the afternoon, you play in the nighttime, you know, and people have to register with emails or whatever. And all the young people in the audience go, you know, are these here to see us, or is there another band on after us, you know? Well, yeah, it was to see us, yeah. You know, and the number of people bumped into, I went to see you in the Jacaranda. So, yeah, it's great, and it's, you know, it keeps you going, really. It keeps you the enthusiasm, you know.
Is the new album a one-off or a witnessing the start of a new chapter?
I think hopefully Modern Sky. It's a 2-album deal we've got with them. And they've got the option on the second album. And hopefully, if it does okay, it gets well reviewed and well received and sells okay, that we'll do the second album, And I've already got 5 or 6 ideas from the hit makers, which I haven't written any lyrics to yet because I'm too busy doing signing CDs. We just signed about 500 CDs this morning. I didn't think CDs existed anymore. I'm nearly throwing all mine out, CDs and cassettes. We're getting cassettes done as well, and vinyl, of course, and the packages and bundles and all that type of thing, So so it's great, I'm enjoying. When we sat down this morning, we spent 3 hours signing this stuff, all of us, and everyone, this is great, this, isn't it? Everyone was enjoying it, even though you think signing stuff for 3 hours would be sure,
And keep your CDs, because even though CDs have never gone away, in my opinion, but there is a resurgence of people buying them again.
Yeah.
And finally, Peter, what's next for the farm? More music, more gigs, or something we wouldn't expect?
I think, writing the next album, that's going to be the big thing, because we spent a few years on this one, and, we have to write this new one. That's always the problem. Like Spartacus, we spent a couple of years developing that, came out, and then we want another album, that's, and that's where the problem lies, really. But, I think we're relaxed about it. So as long as we're enjoying doing it, we'll carry on doing it, and if we're relaxed about it. And we still think we've got something to say. I mean, I think over the years, I think what's happened in the music industry is, the voice of the grassroots hasn't really come across. It's all a bit privately educated musicians, and like to see us as like something we're trying to do something which is still real. We're still trying to say something. We get our inspiration from people who we talk to, really, from the people. We're a people's band.
Hopefully, we don't have to wait another 30 years.
30 months, maybe.